Critical thinking. Dr. Das.
Uh, Good morning, all of you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Audible, sir. Audible.
Okay, thank you. Revered principal of Hadaspur College and my most revered teacher, Dr. P.K. Mahapatra Prafula Mahapatra sir, who has been thoroughly an inspiration for all of us to speak something before any gathering or any audience. And I am greatly inspired by his presence here right now. I see also that Professor Saroj Kumar Mahanti, one of our revered teachers, is also here. All dear colleagues, students, friends present here. At the outset, I must
Okay, microphone paku aso Kailash. Microphone paku ठीक आसो सुना जाऊनी बोल के.
sir. Now, am I audible?
कहो. Yes, but okay, you go on, go on.
So, I am thankful to the college authorities for giving me this opportunity to present a paper under this. This paper was not very familiar to us when we were students in our universities and colleges. So, the topic that Sri Nayak gave me is relevance of critical thinking. So before going to the topics straightforwardly, I will try to pinpoint few examples where actually we are doing uncritical thinking or how badly we are thinking so that it becomes more relevant and it becomes more important to be critical thinkers. So that our understanding of critical thinking, I think, would help us in the process to get clarified about what exactly we mean by critical thinking. If you see how uncritically we are thinking, in few examples, I will just give instance. Most of you are all familiar with such examples. There was a long time ago, we believed that the earth is flat. It was so obvious to us. We see that the earth is flat. We don't see it circular or spherical at all. We experience it. It was so obvious. It was also so obvious that the sun appears to move around the earth. And we believed, we accepted it for a very long period. We changed our belief only when counter evidences were there and we accepted new evidences so that we changed this idea. Also, how could we believe something that is very profoundly wrong and mistaken? I am reminded of one of the most popular person in recent history is Uri Geller of Israel. Uri Geller was believed to have immense miraculous power, mental power, psychic power, by which he could bend things. Just by seeing, he can bend a spoon. He can move a solid thing from one corner of the table to the other corner. So films were made on his life. There are many believers of what he said, even if most of the scientific evidences were against his claims. Perhaps we have uncritical thinking was very popular, and we are popularly uncritical thinkers or bad thinkers in that way. I will also like to give there are thousands of examples of our beliefs, but I will also say about a famous Baba recently who gave said Mahaprasad Prasad with sweet prasads, laddu, to some diabetic patients, and the diabetic patients consumed that, and the matter is in the court now. Also, we accepted a Baba saying that I will cure from your cancer by giving you some powder, etc. We have started believing all these things. We have accepted it. We have accepted so many things because our bad thinking, because we are not critical thinkers. So
sir,
we are in
sir,
a dilemmatic situation.
Kailash sir, excuse me, sir. Sir, ଆପଣ ଇୟରଫୋନ୍ ଟା ୟୁଜ୍ କରନ୍ତୁ, ଟିକେ ଭଲ ଶୁଭିବ। ଏବେ ଟିକେ ଅପ୍ ଡାଉନ୍ ହଉଛି।
Hello. Am I audible now?
You are audible.
Audible. So, should I repeat whatever I said?
Yes, sir. It is okay. Okay, sir.
Okay, right now. You have listened to what I have said just now.
Yes, sir. We have listened.
Okay. So, I'm emphasizing one example in a dilemmatic situation for a couple. In the case of a abnormal pregnancy by a lady, normally the fetus is developed in the uterus, but actually here it is outside the uterus it has developed. On medical examination, it was found that the fetus after growth will be burst, which will cause the death of the mother as well as the fetus. So now there is a problem before the couple. If the fetus is not aborted, then it will explode and cause the death of the mother as well as the fetus. But if it is aborted, then the fetus will be killed, but the mother can be saved. This couple is a Catholic couple. Their religion says that abortion is highly immoral. Killing a life is a sin. So, because they are Catholics, it became very difficult for them to go with the medical advice. Now, what they will do? They are deep-rooted religious faith in one hand, and the scientific evidence says that there is impending danger for the lady in the other hand. If they are bad thinkers, they will continue with the pregnancy. If they are not critical thinkers, and the obvious will happen. So here, this situation is not about logical thinking exactly, but though logical thinking is included in critical thinking, here we are not concerned about the validity of the arguments that we used to do. It is a thinking about our thinking, right? So, thinking things through is one of the aspects of critical thinking that we can say. Uncritical thinking is due to some settled, deep-rooted beliefs or belief systems and opinions which we refuse to give up, even if the facts are changed, and in spite of the concrete evidences against our beliefs are there. So it is a mental state of somebody that he refuses to accept a new fact which is contrary to own belief. So these are the problems with which critical thinking becomes more relevant and more important for us. We are born in a society which is already there. We inherit many ideas, dogmas, superstitions in course of our upbringing in a society. We develop a worldview which is imposed largely on us by our surrounding. Our opinions and beliefs are formed by our seniors, our parents, peer groups, by both media, electronic media and print media. Our mind is controlled without our awareness. We follow blindly our role models who are not necessarily great people. So our free critical thinking is squeezed. We think the way of my society thinks. I think the way I do decisions like this, and I unreasonably also believe. Often we have the tendency to follow footprints of a road mostly taken. We prefer to follow the path that is already there in front of us, which is very clearly available. We don't take the other path that is not taken much. So it is important to be a critical thinker, to go beyond the deep-rooted beliefs and opinions in the path of all kinds of progress, including moral progress. Critical thinking is often confused with critical theory. There is something called a critical theory. Critical theory considers a philosopher as a critic of culture. Though it is related, but it is not exactly the same thing. It is a way of philosophization which involves a moral critique of a society and culture. This is different. Critical theory is an attempt to disprove or reject a popularly held idea or an influential way of thinking in society. Critical gender theories or race theories are critique of cultures in this way. Critical thinking is also wrongly understood by some as criticism of people, their views, ideas, or to be argumentative with them to prove that you are right. But whereas critical thinking is not about much to prove that you are right, but to prove what is truth. So a critical thinker is genuinely, sincerely a seeker of truth. He will be not arguing to prove his point, making, justifying, rationalizing in order to be right in your argument is one thing, and seeking truth and arriving at truth is something that a critical thinker seeks. So critical thinking is also not merely logical thinking, because logical thinking in the sense that we are arriving at a deductively, that formal logic, I mean to say here, confined to formal logic, logical thinking this way. That is, we are confined on analyzing arguments and testing their validity in the sense logical thinking is. Logic is the science of correct process of thinking in the sense that its concern is the principles that govern the validity of an argument. I'm talking about formal logic. It determines that a particular conclusion is necessarily following from one or more premises. But critical thinking is an ability to analyze objectively a given fact or issue to form a sound judgment. Critical thinking is a cognitive skill. People also call it a metacognition, which includes analyzing, criticizing, synthesizing, evaluating, and judging. Critical thinking helps one to form sound judgment on the basis of information gathered from different sources, observations, experiences, reflection, or reasoning. Reasoning is the hallmark of critical thinking. So, it is an ability to think clearly and rationally. So, it is disposition. So, it is an ability to think clearly and rationally. Therefore, logic is a useful tool in critical thinking. It is also a systematic evaluation of arguments, ideas, and theories of others. The basic principle, the basic premise of critical thinking involves asking critical questions to form informed and reasoned opinion and sound judgment. even how it can apply to also our day-to-day life. Like the success of a democracy, it is said, Amartya Sen would like to prefer here. It is not just giving opinions, but the success of a democracy lies in giving reasoned opinion and informed opinion and inquiring about the sources that we have the information. So it is well-informed, reasoned opinion that matters even in case of success of a democracy that we are living and we're so much fond of. Critical thinking is defined as reasonable, reflective thinking that is focused on what to believe or what to do. Our action will be followed by our beliefs. It is widely understood that intellectual honesty, which Professor Mahapatra has very nicely elaborated, intellectual honesty, intellectual sincerity, and integrity, and open-mindedness. It is free from bias, prejudice, and ends at objectivity. It is opposed to emotionalism. A critical thinker is a seeker of truth and is not carried away by his prejudices. A critical thinker is aware of his prejudices, aware of his emotional inclinations, his biases and emotion while making a judgment. He will not allow his judgment to be affected by his emotion and bias and prejudices that he had. So, critical thinking is relevant in almost all domains. As thinking clearly and rationally is important for a student, a researcher, a manager, legal professionals, and even important in our day-to-day life where we need to make decisions and judgments. Looking at the history of critical thinking, Professor Mahapatra has very rightly said it goes back to Socrates. I think today the educationists are more emphasizing on critical thinking in their curriculum. So that the students need to know what is critical thinking and should have the critical thinking skill. They should be disposed to this skill. When we are teachers, we feel that while teaching, we need not specifically teach any critical thinking skill to our students. Rather, while teaching something, we can inspire our student to think themselves. Teaching, so far our teaching system is concerned, we are just our teachers' words are taken for granted, and we have just got the content of whatever is told to us in any topic, including philosophy, that we are well informed about philosophies, and we are told what is right and wrong, but we do not learn to decide for ourselves what is right and wrong in any situation. So critical thinking skills can empower one, can give this ability to not only analyze the informations you have in your textbooks or what the teacher says. So now it is felt more in last 100 years, though critical thinking was a practice, a method of education, learning in Socratic period, while Socrates was having these dialogues and discussing, and it is very importantly held. But in last 100 years, we find a popularity of critical thinking as a skill to be taught, to be acquired. That is, it started with a John Dewey in USA in something like 1909. He has defined critical thinking and maybe called the father of model critical thinking. But I'm not going detail to his, but I'll be broadly speaking about what we mean by critical thinking right now. The history of learning critical thinking skills in education was in a way begun by Socrates, but John Dewey is considered father of modern critical thinking tradition. He called it reflective thinking. John Dewey said it is reflective thinking. He defines critical thinking as active, persistent, and careful consideration of a belief or supposed form of knowledge in the light of the grounds which support it and the further conclusions to which it tends. That is, he is concerned about critical thinking is not passive. We are not passive listeners. We are just gatherers of facts. We are not like that. It is an active process of evaluating, analyzing, and judging for ourselves independently. So, what further conclusions can be there, what further implications can be there, also is taken care of by a critical thinker. More recently, Michael Scarville defines critical thinking is a skilled and active interpretation and evaluation of observations and communications, information, and argumentation. Critical thinking is fundamental in diverse language, thinking things through for yourself, raise questions yourself, find relevant information yourself, rather than learning in a passive way from someone else. It is thinking about our thinking. For a critical thinker, what matters most is the reasons for his beliefs and the implication of his beliefs. So reasoning is most important in critical thinking. Critical thinking is characterized by mainly the standards like clarity. My statement must express a proposition. By proposition, the minimum definition that I have here is it is capable of expressing meaning. The proposition is capable of having a meaning. So this meaning has to be communicated. The meaning of what I say should be clear for a better communication. It is often argued that I am responsible for what I have said. Someone said me that, friend, I am responsible for what I have said, but I am not responsible for what you have heard or what you have understood. But here, also the responsibility of a critical thinker comes to the picture, that you should take care that you have communicative competence, right kind of communication you are capable of doing. If what I say is vague, obscure, unclear, confusing, or ambiguous, it may not effectively communicate. So, in case of judgments in science, we need accuracy. No superficial or rough estimates are given. Accuracy is important for a media reporter. The publishing houses take care not to give figures which are inaccurate and not true to the facts. So also, a researcher, while giving quantitative judgments, must be accurate. Clarity and accuracy are different. For example, when I say cats live up to the age of 10 years, I am clearly saying, but not accurately saying. A statement is accurate if it is true, confirmed by evidence, defended by justification, corroborated by facts, authenticated by testimony, and is guaranteed and established. So, a critical thinker must take into account the source of the information and credibility of the source before accepting information as true. Once, a proposed groom asked about the bride. The information was given to him, the would-be bride, the groom, that the bride is extremely beautiful. Now, the critical thinker in the groom asks a question. who said that the bride is extremely beautiful. The middleman said that it is the mother of the bride who said that the bride is beautiful. When we get lot of promises, such kind of things, now you can take what value you will give to this kind of information, because it matters who says it. When we get lot of promises by the politicians during election, either verbally or in their manifesto, the critical thinker in us doubts the credibility. They do not accept, they refuse to accept, looking at their records. Our source of information must be also precise and relevant. We can make a sound judgment about climate change. We must take into consideration what are relevant, like the greenhouse effect, global warming, and even industrial growth. But some information regarding solar eclipse may not be relevant here. So, relevance is one of the important factors while making a critical, for a critical thinker. To conclude, we can say that a critical thinker is open-minded, is skeptical, does not accept anything as true unless it is reasonable. He is not rigid in his views. He changes his mind when new facts and evidences are found. The key point is to be aware of fallacious reasonings which prevents us to know the truths. The inability to think critically makes one a victim of manipulation and be carried away by the art of rhetoric by vested interest groups. You can be carried away by some opinion. Some opinions, some views, some ideas are very close to my heart emotionally. I may like something deeply emotionally involved in some doctrine, some aging, some person whom I take to be my role model. Here, I fail to be a critical thinker if I accept emotionally and with my bias with regard to that person, that ideology, even if I have new findings, new facts, new evidences, counter evidences against what I believe are available in front of me. If I am not flexible, I am rigid, then I am the least, not a critical thinker. A person who is not a critical thinker is condemned to be a yes man and just accepted because I have said at the beginning that because my parents believed this, I believed this. Because our teacher said this, I believed this. So they have lost the ability to think for themselves, think independently, without the help of any papers. They lose their ability in favor of becoming very uncritical and bad reasons they can make. And to accept something on the basis of good reasons and to accept something on the basis of bad reason has to be clearly distinguished. So we are provided with in semi-logical fallacies and informal logical fallacies and formal logical fallacies. A lot of instances are given, a lot of examples are given where these fallacies occur normally to human beings. And one should guard oneself as a critical thinker against the fallacies, and the role of a philosopher, particularly logicians, is much more relevant and is much more important in the case of critical thinking. So critical thinking is also, like analytical thinking, is a hallmark of philosophy. As logic is the foot of philosophers to think logically, one must be aware of the logical fallacies in order to be a critical thinker. One must distinguish between good reasons, sound reasons, but from this, it does not follow that always we have the conclusive evidence in favor of our judgments that we make. It need not be conclusive evidence. It cannot be absolutely certain, but it has the reasonableness to accept, and we should know the skill to use it reasonably. We cannot accept it dogmatically. We cannot accept out of prejudices and superstitions that we have. We can go beyond all that is possible for us as a critical thinker. So, critical thinking is the buzzword nowadays, and it is now getting popularity in the sense that everybody is beginning a researcher, modern age researcher. Even if a topic is very close to his heart, he's going to support it. And we have in Indian tradition, there is something called khandana, and the thesis is there, and whatever you are criticizing, you are doing the khandana part, then you are having the evaluation part, that is the conclusion. You give the conclusion, and you, after rejecting this thesis, you are going to give your own conclusion based on reasonings, evidences that you have collected. So, the tradition has been very argumentative in Indian context, as Professor Mahapatra has very rightly pointed out. Thank you. This is what precisely I have meant by critical thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable lecture. From these two thinkers' lecture, it is obvious that critical thinking is the nucleus of both spiritual as well as material development, so to say, progress of a country. It is the basis of culture, philosophy, and civilization. With all these observations, may I now request Jagannath Prasad Mahanti, one of my colleague of the department, to
Now, are there any questions to Kailash Babu's lectures?
Yes, sir. I wish to have a question for Kailash sir. Sir,
Yes,
sir,
yes.
yes, sir. So, sir was making a reference to a pregnant lady where the fetus, where the baby is outside the womb, and any outgrowth will be dangerous to the mother. And there is a religious notion, the Catholic notion, that we cannot go for abortion. And there is a thinking that no, we should need to save a life. So there is a what opposition between the two views, and this is where critical thinking really plays a part. And actually, when we are stripped to a stand, when we take the preconceptions, the preconceived notions, and we are not in a position to sacrifice those, then a lot of problems do come. But when we talk of, when we are having an adaptability to critical thinking, there is more of flexibility, open-mindedness, as Professor Mahapatra sir has said, and there is always a room for self-correction. Not that the Catholics do not say they have a religious conviction, they have a religious belief that abortion is not right, but that can be corrected. So a critical thinking should not be restricted, as Professor Mahapatra said, it is not restricted to philosophy, it is open to all branches. So also critical thinking is also open to even religious fields. The religious thinkers should think that way, to think of that abortion.
Yes.
Okay, saving a life is so important there, and we don't know whether that baby will be born or not, we don't know. But in the process of going for a religious doctrine, we are killing somebody who is alive, who is so close to us, who is so loving to us. So that's how critical thinking really guides us to do things in a practical way. So critical thinking is more of a practical sort. It is not just restricting ourselves to theories or preconceived notions or superstitions or blind beliefs. It is an open mind where a lot of flexibility is available. There is a lot of openness for self-correction. We may have gone wrong, but there is always a scope for self-correction. And this is how critical thinking guides. I think Professor Das agrees to this, or he has something to say, please, sir.
You have rightly pointed out this. Exactly, this is what the content says. A critical thinker takes note of a context where it is detrimental if you follow this for a life is at a risk. So it is to that extent is you are open, even if you are having religious faith and religious belief, you can go beyond and be a critical thinker that will save you your life even. And that is precisely a logical thinking that way, and all reasonable thinking is possible if you think this way. If you are rigid with one or the other idea that you have, deep-rooted ideas, maybe it is religious ideas or your social-centric ideas, then you are in trouble and you are not a critical thinker. So critical thinking saves you. So it is not only, as you have rightly observed, it is not only relevant in research or professional life, but also our day-to-day life to take decisions as a critical thinker. You are right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, Dr. Pramod Kumar Das, sir.
I have one question to Professor Das. Professor Das beautifully said that critical thinking should be free from any type of emotion. Emotion should not be there. Emotional bias should not be there. Emotional bias or any type of bias. Any type of bias. My point is, critical thinking or biased thinking, these two types of thinkings are executed by an individual. When the individual has an has a power, he's a judge, or he's the king, or he's the father of the family, or the head of the family, or he's the president in the meeting. So these people are individuals. They have a power with them because their decisions will be accepted as final. This is a respect to the judges, but the judge is an individual. The judge has his own subjectivity. The judge has his own perspectives. So when the judge is an individual, when the king is an individual, and he will be accepted by the others, somehow it is going against the freedom of a critical thinking, because the king will be accepted, because the judge will be accepted, even if the judgment is going wrong. So for this problem, there is a judiciary system which is beyond the king, which is beyond the government. But in also judiciary system, we have the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court judge is also an individual. He has his own subjectivity. The judge of the Supreme Court, the judgment of the judge of the Supreme Court is also final. So in human mechanism, either in society or in judiciary, the matter ends with a subjectivity. Therefore, Immanuel Kant said, we have to understand this criticism, that our best knowledge is the knowledge through the categories of understanding. So we can't understand the phenomena. Do you accept this or not? That the judgment of the king, judgment of a judge can also be questioned. And suppose we shall go to the court of law, then the supreme end is the Supreme Court. And many times the order of the Supreme Court is also subject to revision, and that has been revised by the public demand. So how do you see this? See to this? Thank you.
Very, very pertinent question, actually. Pertinent question in the sense, can we overcome our subjectivity? So these are, I will consider these are, then objectivity will be a misnomer. Because we are bound to be affected by our social relationship. As a member of the society, I am having some ideas already before I am, as I have said, we are born in a society which is already there with all its norms and principles. And I learn all this, I gather from my dears and near ones. And those are going to be the great barriers. My emotion, my emotional inkling, everything is there. That's very natural with all of us. A judge is a human being, the king is a human being, and it is a human weakness in general, we can say, that we may make a judgment basing from our own emotional prejudices and our subjective bias that may affect. That is very much there. That is very much there. But critical thinking is not absolute critical thinking in the sense that you will be totally independent, but more and more critical thinker you are, the more and more you don't allow all these subjective considerations in the path of your making a judgment and while seeking truth. So justice demands this much minimum, that the judge's decision remains beyond reasonable doubt. So suppose available facts are not there, that is another thing for which my judgment is being not proper. So it is always that you allow your critical thinking as far as it can go in order to make a sound judgment. And sound judgments are always. So critical thinking, these are the barriers, but this doesn't mean that critical thinking is impossible. It is possible when these are the parameters by which critical thinker will act. That you are aware of your limitations, you are aware of your weaknesses, you are aware of your subjectivity as a citizen. So, but we are approaching towards a judgment which will be objective, a judgment which will be sound judgment. I'm not saying that the judgment is absolutely certain and infallible and nobody can reject it at any point of time. It can be changed, but it is very proper on my part to allow my reasoning and the availability of facts that is with me to make the best judgment possible. So a critical thinker seeks to give the best judgment as a seeker of truth. So, but that is there always, as you have very rightly pointed out, we are all suffering from the subjectivity. But another thing that you have not pointed out, but I like to answer that also. Suppose you are a critical thinker. That's the more important point I will raise. Suppose you are a critical thinker. You are a best critical thinker. You are aware of all these things. You have the ability and the skill of critical thinking to the optimum. But you are refusing to apply this when a situation comes, in a practical situation. Because you find if you apply this, it is to your disadvantage. So the ethical question also comes. Here, I would say critical thinker is not just a metacognition theory. It is also to include ethical boundaries. You are a critical thinker means also you should do critical thinking. Just not you are skilled with critical thinking, but you ought to do critical thinking, which Professor Mahapatra has given some hints while talking in a context. How do we also practice critical thinking? So that is another extension of the question that you have previously asked. But this is what I have to. I'm sure this is going to be.
So to the question what Pramod Das sir has raised and to the response, well, I have two say statements in my mind. One, there goes a general saying that king does no wrong. There goes a general saying, king does no wrong. And another statement by Kierkegaard who says truth is subjectivity. If we bring these two ideas together, how do you take with reference to critical thinking?
Nobody is infallible, right? So the king can do no wrong. I am not sure about the context in which he says. Maybe sometimes we are stretching a metaphor too far.
Sir, actually,
Critical thinking.
actually, the decision, say the king may be the judge of a Supreme Court, because we have to obey to that. Maybe he's a king. Okay, we have to obey to that. So there is a general saying, king does no wrong. A general saying goes.
Exactly.
Let me respond to that. Actually, this is a very controversial thing. Okay, you see, the king can do no wrong is something which is a bias that can be put to question. Even the judgments of the Supreme Court also can be questioned. Only that you do not question it because in that particular area where you have accepted that you should accept whatever the Supreme Court says, then you cannot question. But not that it is absolutely unquestionable. You can also think about it. You may become an opinion maker otherwise, so that it will lead to the revision of the judgment. That is why there is the provision of applying for revision of your judgment. That also is there. So the scope of critical thinking is wider than any game. This is a game actually, and here you are playing according to the rules of the game. The rule is, if you accept the idea of jurisprudence, then a judgment has to be accepted. You cannot openly challenge it. But that is limited to a particular game, rules of the game. But again, that also can be challenged. Even the judges themselves also revise them. That is the provision for revision. So critical thinking is wider than judgments and the opinion of the kings and all that. So it all depends on what you accept. If you accept the game of jurisprudence, then as long as it has not been revised, you accept it. But then you can also try to appeal to the judges to make a revision of their own judgments, and they do it sometimes. Okay, so critical thinking is far above all these things. Only that it becomes restricted because of the rules of the game. Okay, I think that should clarify.
But
the thing is yes. What is point is that a judge, in order to be a good judge, and his judgment, in order to be a sound judgment, must follow critical thinking. That is precisely the thing. A judge not having
he
the
has been
ability
also
of
exercising the power of critical thinking. Yes.
But then he is not exercising. The scope of revision is also a mark of critical thinking. That the judge is open to criticism, that his judgments may be wrong. So that is also a mark of critical thinking.
That is why there is provision for revision of judgment.
Yes. That provision says about accepting critical thinking. That provision. And also it depends on what good judges we have who are not proficient in critical thinking. That is very unfortunate and in misfortune. But a judge also should be a critical thinker. That's what the contention is.
A judge is actually. Judge is a critical thinker.
Should be at least, if
only
he is
that,
not.
I mean, see, when you are critical thinking, idea is all right. But when you are taking resort to critical thinking, it doesn't mean that you are absolutely right. Okay.
Critical thinking doesn't
so the provision for revision of revision of judgments is there. That is openness. Right.
So the judge, as a critical thinker, is open for his own self-correction. A critical thinker, whenever he comes to a judgment, there is always an openness for self-correction. So that is the true mark of a critical thinker. I feel that. There is always openness for self-correction, whatever the decision may be.
So that is just Thank
you. We have one more last queries by Dr. Kailash Chandra Maharana sir. Sir, please unmute your mic and
Okay, my hearty pranam to my teacher, Professor Sir and Professor Kailash Chandra. Today, both the lectures have benefited us, and both have given their conceptual clarification on the critical thinking, and it is very much benefited to all of us. But sometimes it is found that a best critical thinker puts his reflection on different philosophical issues and different philosophical problems and other thoughts. But he fails in his own situation and own thought because sometimes he is found to be biased. When situation comes to himself, actually he is biased. Why a critical thinker sometimes biased in his own situation? Sir.
and to whom this question is directed to, sir?
Maranavu,
Sir, sir, sir.
look, you are
Mokoivi.
biased.
Mokoivi.
If you are biased, then you are not a critical thinker.
Yes.
So, if you are prone to this bias, a critical thinker is always aware of his limitations and weaknesses.
Quite true. Yes.
He is aware of his biases that there, and he will not allow his personal bias to affect his judgment, because a sound judgment should be free from all these things. So,
Right.
I'm just if I understand what you say in the context, suppose for example, when we are doing research, I will give you an example because most of us were involved in research. Sometimes a candidate does not do justice to the opponent. For example, you have a Marxist ideas and you are criticizing liberalism. So here the argument is that a critical thinker in you will say that let me first defend liberalism as far as is possible with all kind of intellectual honesty and integrity. Then I will criticize in equal power, intellectual power and honesty that the weaknesses of that doctrine. But most of some time what we do as researchers is that we put our opponent's view in a very weak pedestal and reject it and try to prove our point. So research methodology itself says that there is a lot of scope for critical thinking there, in the sense that we do justice to the opponent's view. That is what I have just said. Indian systems of philosophization allows this. That when a particular system is attacking another system in Indian context, or in the same system, different views are there, they present their opponent's view as powerfully as possible. So that is exposition of their view and doing full justice as far as my capacity in understanding that doctrine, that theory, that idea. Then I will try to criticize it, not putting it in a very weak field and just finding out its weaknesses without comparing it, saying that. So it is a matter of taking comprehensively the view that surrounds it. So that is a kind of doing justice to my opponent's view while criticizing my opponent's view or opponent's idea. So their intellectual honesty is a hallmark of critical thinking also. That is what Professor Mahapatra has repeatedly said several times. That is what is my take on this.
Okay.
If Professor Mahapatra want to respond to what Professor Maharana has said, then sir, please respond.
I think Dr. Das has replied to his question. I have nothing to say now.
Okay, thank you. If any more queries, then please raise your hand or ask fast, or this is all from the post talk session. Thank you. Now over to yes, sir. Very brief, please.
I agree with Professor Das, what is said at the end of his answer. Professor Hrudanand Rai was saying very beautiful thing. He always says that when there is a dialogue process, they appear to be two parties, Dipaksha. But actually, in the proper dialogue process, every paksha really wants to establish the truth, not to win the argument. That should be the spirit of a critical thinker. That I am arguing only to know the truth, not to win over my opponent. If that frankness, that honesty is there, that is intellectual integrity, as Professor said, and that is the real spirit of critical thinking. I may be defeated, but I should learn what is truth. It is not necessary that I shall win the argument. I shall realize the truth through this dialogue process, then this dialogue process is meaningful. Thank you.
It is opposite to dogmatic thinking. And openness, skeptic attitude, and imagination. These are the three preconditions of a critical thinker. Anyway, it is really enlightening, both these lectures, very enlightening and benefited our students and participants a very lot. Now I request my colleague Mrs. Charulata Das to propose a vote of thanks to the speakers, participants, and all those who are connected with us. Mrs. Das.
Thank you so much, sir. Pranam ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କୁ esteemed professor Kailash sir, respected sirs and madam present here, my dear students. I deem a great pleasure of my privilege to propose vote of thanks and acknowledge to the contribution of all who are eagerly to mark this webinar successful. And first of all, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to ICPR for promoting this type of webinar on behalf of my department, philosophy department, UN Autonomous College of Science and Technology. I would like to convey my heartfelt thanks to our chief speaker, Professor Sir. You are very sincere and giving us very valuable talking, sir. It is very happy thanks to you for your gracing and sharing our audience of your thoughtful ideas, vision on critical thinking. Seriously, we are very happy, sir. Thanks you once again. I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to our Kailash sir. Your talk was very inspiring and all of us. And thank you for giving your valuable time, sir. A special thanks to our respected principal, Arun sir, who is our friend, philosopher and guide for making this webinar more successful. I express my gratitude to all distinguished dignitaries and participants for making this webinar more successful. I would like to express my gratitude to our HOD, Vijay sir, who worked hard for this webinar becomes more important. I express my thanks to my colleagues Jagannath sir for questionnaire session, and I express my thanks to Antarjami Vinita madam for a benign presence here, and last but not
କୁଆଡେ ପଳେଇଲା ସେ ଚାରୁ କୁଆଡେ ଚାଲିଗଲା ଠିକ ଅଛି ବିଜୟ
ଆଚ୍ଛା ବିଜୟ ତୁମେ ଟିକେ ଥ୍ୟାଙ୍କ୍ସ ଦେଇଦିଅ ବିଜୟ।
ନା ସେ ଦେଇଦେଲାଣି ତ ଆଉ କଣ ଅଛି ତ ଦେଇଦେଲା ଆଉ କଣ ଅଛି you wind up the meeting
Okay, okay.
ପ୍ରଣାମ ସାର୍ ସାର୍ ପ୍ରଣାମ ସାର୍ ବହୁତ କଥା ଆମେ ଜାଣିଲୁ ସାର୍ ଯୋଉଟା ଆମେ ଜାଣି ନଥିଲୁ ବହୁତ କଥା ଜାଣିଲୁ ଆଜି ଆମ କନସେପ୍ଟ ଟା ପୁରା କ୍ଲିୟର କରିଛନ୍ତି ସାର୍।
thank you
Okay, okay. All the participants and speakers as well as to ICPR, I express my gratitude, and the participants who make the webinar enlightening. They are also thankful. This is, we have conducted the first periodical lecture sponsored by ICPR on World Philosophy Day. The speaker was Professor Saroj Kumar Mahanti. He delivered his lecture on a thought experiment. Today, the first speaker was Prafulla Kumar Mahapatra. He delivered on critical thinking, philosophy, everything. Third speaker, Dr. Kailash Chandra very nicely reflected his thought, how it is relevant not only social but in every aspects of life, which is reflected in the writings of Professor Mahapatra in his book. Let me conclude my speech that we are really fortunate because education policy of Government of India, National Education Policy 2020, highlights this concept, critical thinking, that should be developed among students, among the youth, for the real development of the country. So, with these words, I think this is my perception that we have really done the job by inviting such speakers to this department through webinars. I am really thankful to you all, and pranam to all my teachers and participants. Thank you, sir. Now the meeting is closed. Thank you.
thank you very much, thank you all of you.
Thank you
I
sir.
have enjoyed
Sir,
speaking to
namaskar.
you. Thank you.
Sir, namaskar.